Hello, I'm Georg von Herrick on Europe in You this time.
The law to protect patients from dangerous doctors, calls for stringent checks on fracking,
and in the studio, the risky journey to Europe, how to control migration from North Africa.
Electronic cigarettes will be regulated by the EU, but not in the same way as medicines. That's following a vote in the European Parliament. So-called e-cigarettes vaporise a liquid nicotine mix to give a kick like a traditional cigarette. They've become incredibly popular over the last few years. Dave Dawn from Sunderland says he used to smoke 60 cigarettes a day. He believes thousands of people like him have been able to give up tobacco because of e-cigs.
Time after time you hear of people that have discovered e-cigs. They've discovered a way to carry on smoking, but without smoking. They're still getting the nicotine, they're getting all of the pleasure, but they're not getting any of the death. And that's a win-win situation no matter how you look at it.
Concerned about their safety, the EU planned to regulate e-cigarettes in the same way as nicotine gum and patches. But some users worried that could lead to e-cigs being taken off the market. So they lobbied the European Parliament to change its mind.
This is the petition from across Europe, from all of those thousands of people who are now using e-cigarettes.
Very much.
In the vote, a majority of MEPs agreed. That means there will be safety controls and e-cigarettes will not be allowed to be sold to children.
It is a victory. To class these things as medicinal products is quite ludicrous. Why should they be a medicinal product? They're a very useful thing for somebody who's trying to give up cigarette smoking. A great friend of mine has done it. His wife is asthmatic. She had a serious asthmatic attack in his presence. He had to get off cigarettes, and he has used e-cigarettes to do it, and they are working.
Yorkshire MEP Linda McAvan was in charge of getting the legislation through the European Parliament. She says she still has reservations about e-cigarettes.
When the British regulator did a study, he found that some didn't even contain nicotine, or nicotine content wasn't clear. So if smokers are going to find them useful, we have to know what's in them. So whatever comes out of this process, I do hope that we have products which are what they say on the tin and that they work properly to help people quit smoking.
Many highly skilled doctors come from abroad to work in the NHS, but there have been cases of staff with insufficient English language skills or even questionable medical knowledge. Dr. Ubani came to the UK from Germany without the British authorities knowing about his history. It was only after he gave a fatal overdose to one of his Cambridgeshire patients that he was struck off. Now MEPs have voted for more checks on those coming to the UK and on British doctors going abroad. And a Europe-wide mechanism will flag up potentially dangerous doctors not fit to practice.
This alert mechanism is going to be absolutely key to making sure that if a doctor or a professional is struck off in another member state, that we will be alerted across the EU in every single member state by the competent authority, which means that cases like Dr. Ubani won't be able to happen again.
It was always possible and desirable for foreign doctors to be checked for their language skills, and those who said it wasn't were making excuses. But we've taken those excuses away by saying you should do it, that you can do it at any time.
Still to come.
The celery recognised as a cut above the rest, and the battle over whether the EU should regulate shale gas.
Since the beginning of this year, an estimated 32,000 people have arrived on Europe's southern shores. Many more have failed to make it that far. 350 people died when their boat sank trying to reach the Italian island of Lampedusa. That's just one case of many. Since that disaster, there's been an increase in air and sea patrols. But what's the answer in the long term? To discuss that question, I'm joined now by UKIP MEP Roger Helmer and the Greens immigration spokesman Jean Lambert. And I'll start with you, Jean, if I may. The scale of the problem, just give us an idea of how big an issue this is. For example, the number of people that the Italian and Maltese and so forth authorities are having to pick up every day, every week.
Well, it varies. It's seasonal. It also varies with the international situation. I mean, you obviously saw a lot more people coming during the conflict in Libya, just as you're now seeing more coming because of the situation in Syria. And people, will be looking for a way to somewhere that they consider to be safer than where they currently are. So at times you can be looking at sort of maybe 1,000 or so a day arriving in Malta, Lampedusa, maybe even slightly more. And this is something which, is not new. I mean, I visited Lampedusa, it must be about 7 or 8 years ago. And we still haven't really found a way of actually dealing with the people when they arrive.
It's not a new problem, Roger Helmer, but it is a problem nonetheless. What's going wrong in your view?
Well, it's been highlighted, of course, by this recent tragedy in Lampedusa, and I think we must separate two things. The first thing is the humanitarian issue. If somebody is drowning, you go and get them out if you possibly can. It would be appalling to do otherwise. But what you cannot then say is because we have dragged this person out of the sea, they now have an inalienable right to come to Europe and be resettled somewhere or other. And the danger is we're creating perverse incentives here, because if it becomes clear that there are more and more boats out there from Europe rescuing people in these rickety North African boats and bringing them ashore in Europe, what is going to happen? You're going to get more and more and more refugees coming. So we must have a policy, yes, humanitarian, don't let people drown, but we must turn them around and send them back. That is absolutely fundamental.
Jean Lambert, turn around and send them back.
Well, again, there are a number of different things going on here. If these are people who are actually claiming asylum, they have a right to claim asylum under international law, under law which the UK has signed up to, all of the European Union countries are. A number of the countries in North Africa aren't. So, they have a right to claim. They have a right to have their claims examined on an individual basis. That again is EU law, it's also UK national law. Then there's the issue about people who have not come to claim asylum but who have actually come to work. And there, that again, the law is clear. Those are people that you have to look at returning to their country of origin, providing you are not putting them in danger by doing so.
So it is a very complicated issue. This idea of increased border controls that seems to be taking place over the last few weeks, is that a sustainable solution, given what Roger Helmer is saying, is that it could actually lead to more people being picked up by European boats, could lead to more problems?
Well, I think if more people are being picked up by boat, then that's a vast improvement on leaving them to drown, which has also happened in the past. Part of that is because, for example, Italian law criminalises people. Fishermen are really nervous that they will be criminalised because they have picked up people in distress at sea. Yes, by all means, we should be doing that, but it's not the primary purpose. That's humanitarian rescue. If what you actually want to be doing is more in the way of border controls, then, frankly, I think there are better ways to do it than actually having drones circulating around the Mediterranean.
I mean, we have a responsibility, surely, don't we, Roger Helmer, not just on the humanitarian front, but on that issue that Jean Lambert's talking about there of people being able to seek asylum in Europe.
Well, I think the asylum system and the asylum laws were created in days when the numbers were nothing like they are now. Jean has already explained that if you claim asylum, you have certain rights. If you're looking for employment, you can be sent back. So what's going to happen? Everybody knows that. They're all going to claim asylum. They're all going to absorb months and perhaps years of claims and appeals and enormous expense, and eventually somebody will have an amnesty and they'll all be allowed to stay. I don't think that the laws we have on asylum actually are fit for purpose in the 21st century, because the numbers are becoming enormous, and of course they all claim asylum, and of course many of them come from places where life is very difficult. And I'm sorry about that, but we can't solve it ourselves.
Okay, answer that point then,
Well, I think
Gina. We're going to end up with unsustainable numbers of people coming to Europe.
Well, that depends what happens in terms of the world situation, both economically and in terms of conflict. And of course, in terms of changing environmental situations, which also lead into those two things. But in terms of what is happening at the moment, I mean, I have visited a number of reception centres at Europe's borders and within the European Union. It's very clear there when you meet a lot of the people there. A number of them are absolutely clear. What they want to do is they want to come, they want to work. They are not claiming asylum. Even some of them who could claim don't. So there are those who are absolutely clear that's what they want. And what they want is an opportunity which they feel is fair and open to them to be able to have that possibility.
Okay.
That's very different from those who are claiming asylum because of what they have, the way in which they have been attacked and are persecuted in their country of origin.
Okay, we'll have to move on slightly from that point, because I want to ask you about this idea of surveillance. The European Parliament recently backed a migrant surveillance system, if I can call it that. They call it Eurosur. It sounds like some kind of dinosaur, but it's not. It's about it's a surveillance system. Is that going to help, Jean Lambert, first of all?
There may be some aspects of it which will help. And I mean, this thing has been in process. It's not recent. It's not a response to Lampedusa. This has, again, been in process since 2008. And the idea of it is to link up a lot of the surveillance systems that there already are at member states' borders, exchange of information, to also have a much better patrol mechanism within the Mediterranean. I think a lot of that is very positive. But, it's being marketed a bit under the aspect of, well, we're trying to solve crime. Most of it is actually about migration, which is not the same thing. I think there are better ways of dealing with migration. There are probably better ways of dealing with crime.
I mean, would you accept, Roger Helmer, that there's a need for Europe to play a role in this, coordinating, as this Eurosur idea is, coordinating the different efforts of different countries?
I would very much like to see the European Union making more effort to control immigration flows in the Mediterranean, and indeed from Eastern Europe. But when I say that, I would stand back as a British Eurosceptic and say, my party wants Britain out of the European Union. We don't want to be part of Schengen. We want Britain to have proper immigration controls. Now, Britain doesn't at the moment, but we need them.
Okay, all right. Well, accepting that, that point, if that was the case, wouldn't Britain still need to take part in kind of a cross-border Europe-wide system?
There might well be opportunities for police cooperation or border force cooperation. We in UKIP have nothing against cooperation with other countries. Our problem is being governed by foreign institutions.
And this issue, as things stand, obviously Britain is a member of the European Union. Do we need to work with perhaps our African neighbouring countries as well as the European countries to find some kind of solution to this?
Well, I mean, this is a role that I'd be happy for Europe to perform. There is a case for working in those countries to control refugee flows within North African countries and possibly to assist in developing those countries so they are more attractive for people to stay in and people don't feel the need to go. But those are long-term objectives. They're not going to deliver a short-term answer.
Jean Lambert, we're going to have to wrap up very briefly, but what should Europe do about this problem? What do you want to see happen now?
Well, I want to see Europe support the United Nations working more in Libya and bringing them, into a decent system. I also want to see the European Union actually sorting out the issue of rescue at sea and who then takes responsibility for the people rescued. This has been dragging on for years. We are seeing a lot of crocodile tears at the moment about Lampedusa in the recent weeks. That is something that they could be doing immediately to at least give people a chance of living long enough to find out what then happens to them.
Okay, well, it's a very difficult issue to solve, but we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks ever so much, both of you, for joining me. Plans to explore shale gas beneath the UK should be subject to the same planning rules as mining or road building, say MEPs.
Environmental impact assessments have to be carried out for many major construction projects. Now the European Parliament has called for fracking to be covered too. Green MEP Keith Taylor says more consultation with local residents should be compulsory.
You try talking to the people in Balcombe and see if they want to participate in the decisions that affect their community. Of course they do. And public participation is an inherent part of the environmental impact process.
But Scottish MEP Struan Stevenson has criticised the move. He believes shale gas offers a huge opportunity for our future energy needs, which will now be tied up, he says, in EU red tape.
I will predict now that we will start importing cheap shale gas from America, while Britain is sitting on millions of tonnes of shale gas, which would be enough to keep our business and industry going for the next 200 years, and we're not going to be able to exploit it because of ridiculous regulations voted by the European Parliament in Strasbourg.
Boats carrying a type of liquid glue will no longer be allowed to wash the chemical into the sea. Polyisobutene, or PIB, is thought to have been responsible for injuring and killing thousands of seabirds earlier this year. Now the International Maritime Organization has announced its rules will forbid the practice from 2014. South West MEP Graham Watson says pressure on the IMO from the whole of Europe has been vital in getting the rules changed.
It shows how effective campaigning can be at European Union level. If Britain had argued for this alone, it wouldn't have carried the same amount of weight as the whole of the European Union. I hope that we will see the MARPOL Convention, which is the law governing these things at sea, law on maritime pollution, actually changed specifically to include PIBs.
Fenland celery is the latest British delight to win EU protection. Growers have long argued that the East of England vegetable, shown here in a promotional video, is something special. Well, now it has joined the likes of champagne and Cornish pasties as a European recognised brand which can't be grown elsewhere and sold under the name. Proud local MEP Vicky Ford is something of a fan.
Fenland celery is particularly delicious because of the peaty soil it grows on, and they've been trying for 2 years now to get this protected status. They've now got protected status. If the celery says it's from the fens, it is from the fens, and if it's not, then it doesn't taste as good.
Well, that's all for now from Europe in You. Don't forget to take a look at our website. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. You can also watch videos via the Europe in You app for iPhone and iPad. See you again soon. Goodbye.